For more original stories, subscribe to Audio Tales. Now, let's begin this one. I thought the worst part was the divorce. But buried inside the paperwork was a will, and that will pulled me into a life I never lived, with a woman I thought I knew, and a child I never knew existed. What began as heartbreak turned into something darker, a trail of secrets, erased identities, and one impossible choice. But in the end, I didn't seek revenge. I protected what mattered, and that made all the difference. Didn't see it coming, not the divorce, not the manila envelope with her name in cold block letters, not the smell of mint toner from the law office still clinging to the papers, and certainly not the page that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. That kind of day where the sky hangs, low and gray, like it's pressing down on you, making you smaller, quieter. I was eating leftover lasagna in the kitchen, the kind she always said was better the second day. The silence in the room was thick, not peaceful, not empty, just intentional. Like something had already left and I was too dumb to realize what. The doorbell rang. I remember thinking it was probably another Amazon delivery she forgot to cancel, something half useful and overpriced. But when I opened the door, the courier didn't even make eye contact. Just asked for a signature and handed over the envelope like it was radioactive. Inside, 5 sheets of paper, a short cover letter from her lawyer, 2 copies of the divorce agreement, and, tucked in the back, like a napkin slipped into a funeral program, a copy of a last will and testament I'd never seen before. My name was on it, but the signature wasn't mine, and neither was the money. I just stared at it. Not shocked, not angry, numb, in that weird way your body sometimes goes before your mind catches up. I heard the refrigerator hum behind me, like it was trying to fill in the silence. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. And outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering across wet asphalt. We'd been married 6 years, lived in a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania, the kind where the mailman still waves and neighbors borrow sugar without shame. I thought we were fine. We didn't scream, didn't cheat, didn't break dishes. We were quiet, predictable, responsible. Apparently, that wasn't enough for her. I signed the acknowledgement form, didn't cry, didn't call her, just stood there with the pen in my hand and a kind of buzzing in my ears. But I couldn't stop looking at that one page, the will. It was dated 6 months ago, from a man named Richard L. Shaw. I didn't recognize the name. He wasn't family, not hers, not mine. No mention of a lawyer or notary. But there I was, listed as the sole beneficiary of an estate worth just over $480,000. I felt a flicker of something, not hope, not excitement, more like suspicion disguised as confusion. Why include this with the divorce? Why now? And then I saw the post-it note. It had fallen from the envelope and landed near the floorboard, curling slightly at the edges. A single line written in her handwriting, the one I used to find charming for how she dotted her I's with an almost perfect circle. This is why I had to leave. My stomach tightened. For a second, the whole kitchen seemed to shift sideways. The smell of lasagna, the flickering light above the sink, even the weight of the envelope in my hands. It all bent inward like the beginning of a storm. This was no mistake. I sat down, the papers spread out in front of me like puzzle pieces from a different life, my name on a stranger's will. My wife walking out without a word of explanation, and nearly $500,000 tied to a dead man I'd never met. It wasn't grief I felt. It wasn't betrayal yet either. It was the uncanny, eerie sensation that reality had folded in on itself, that someone knew something about me, something I didn't know about myself. I started rereading the will, slowly this time, looking for anything, a phrase, an address, even a typo that could anchor it in something real. And there it was. The second page listed a property, a house in upstate New York. I had never been to that town, never even heard of it. But the deed was included, transferred, as of 2 months ago, directly into my name. Paid in full. Tax history cleared. And I remembered the quiet phone call she'd taken 2 months ago. Said it was her sister. Stepped into the backyard. For privacy, I didn't think much of it. Why would I? I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, the divorce papers on the coffee table, The will folded in my lap like some ancient map I couldn't read. The heater clicked and groaned in the corner. But I stayed cold. Not the kind you fix with. A blanket. The kind that gets in your chest and stays there. At 2:18 a.m. I stood up and went to our bedroom. My bedroom now. Her side of the closet was empty. Clean, like no one had ever used it. But in the drawer, under a faded scarf she never wore, was a photo I hadn't seen in years. Us, smiling. Wind in her hair. Taken at a gas station in Vermont during a road trip we never finished. I turned it over. No message. Just the date. October 19th. The same date on the will. Coincidence? I didn't believe in those anymore. The next morning, I called the number listed at the bottom of the property deed. Left a message asking for any available records. I didn't say who I was. I didn't want to tip anything off. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was stepping into. Later that afternoon, I got a reply. The voice was calm. Professional. Yes, Mr. Shaw left the house to you before his passing. If you'd like, we can arrange a walkthrough. His attorney can meet you on site next week. No mention of my wife. No explanation of the connection. Just facts. Clean, polite, detached facts. I said yes. And the second I hung up, something shifted. In my chest. Not relief, not clarity, but a sense of motion. Like the ground beneath me had started to slide, and all I could do was follow. I didn't know what I was going to find in that house, but I knew it had answers. And I wasn't ready. For them. I used to think I was the kind of man people could depend on. The steady type. Not flashy. Not ambitious in a greedy way. Just constant. You marry someone like that because you want calm, not chaos. You want structure, not surprises. I was a high school math teacher for over 14 years. Still am, technically though. I've been on personal leave since the divorce. I taught algebra, trigonometry, and sometimes coached the after-school chess club. Kids liked me because I didn't talk down to them. Parents liked me because I answered emails on time. Principals liked me because I didn't complain when the budget got slashed and we had to share textbooks again. My wife, Anna, worked in publishing, editorial assistant, then junior editor, then eventually freelance work from home. She said she needed space to be creative. So I gave it to her. I gave her space, quiet mornings, fresh coffee, and a partner who paid the bills on time. I didn't think that would be what undid us. Looking back now, I wonder if that's exactly what did. We met at a coffee shop. Cliché, I know. She was reading something by Joan Didion. I made a comment about the line she underlined, and she looked up at me with this sharp, evaluating gaze, like she was surprised someone had actually noticed. Our first conversation was more like a debate, but she smiled the whole time. I liked that about her. She didn't shy away from uncomfortable truths. She was never reckless, never impulsive. She was deliberate. Every move she made was measured, every word chosen with care. So for her to just leave, with no warning, no fight, no farewell, told me this wasn't sudden. She'd been planning it. Quietly. Probably. For months. The night she moved out, I had gone to my brother's for dinner. Just steak and beer and bad TV. When I got home, her things were gone. No note, no forwarded address. Just a hollow echo in the closet and a bare space where her desk used to be. At first, I told myself she'd be back. That this was a break. A moment. Something we could talk through once the heat wore off. But there was no heat. Just distance. And then the envelope came. Since then, I've lived like someone waiting for a test result. In the in-between. Not sick, not well. Just aware that something is about to upend you. I didn't tell anyone about the will. Not yet. I wasn't even sure it was real. It felt like a trap. Like some paper-thin decoy laid out to lure me into some larger web. But I couldn't leave it alone. Every night, I read over it again. Richard L. Shaw. No mention of his connection to me. No listed relatives. No explanation for why he would leave $500,000 and a house to a math teacher. From a small town in Pennsylvania. My brain kept turning over possibilities. Maybe he was a long-lost uncle? A distant relative? Someone whose life I touched without realizing it? But that didn't track. My family history is clean. Small, predictable. My father was a steel worker. My mother taught second grade. We didn't have skeletons in the closet, just dust and old tax forms. But there was something else. When I went to the DMV to renew my license about a year ago, they flagged my name for an address I'd never lived at. Some clerical error, they said. I brushed it off, forgot about it. But now, it came back like a whisper I couldn't shake. I kept trying to remember anything, any connection, any moment, any person named Richard who might have crossed my path and left this kind of mark. Nothing came. But then I thought about Anna again. Her freelancing, the long hours alone, the trips to writers' retreats I never asked too much about. And the name? Shaw. She used to joke that if she ever wrote under a pen name, it would be something snappy, something like Anna Shaw. It meant nothing at the time, just a passing line. But now it echoed. What if it wasn't a joke? What if the will wasn't a mistake, but a message? I started digging, quietly. No one at work knew. I called out sick and spent hours on online probate databases, obituaries, tax registries. It took time, days. But eventually I found it. Richard Leonard Shaw. Died 6 months ago. Age, 63. No children. Bachelor. Lived alone in a large colonial-style house in Windermere, New York. Former accountant. Donated to environmental causes. Survived by a single sibling, whose name was redacted in the publicly available file due to privacy restrictions. But there was a picture. Grainy, black and white. He was standing in front of his house, arms crossed, half smile. And I swear to God there was something in his posture, the tilt of his head, the deep-set eyes. It wasn't me, but it could have been. The resemblance was uncanny. Not exact, but enough to make my skin crawl. Enough to make me wonder, did he think I was someone else? Or was there more? The next week I packed a small bag, told the school I needed more time, and I drove to Windermere. The town was smaller than I imagined. 1 gas station, 2 diners, no traffic lights. Just a scattering of homes pressed up against a gray horizon. The air smelled of old wood and early frost. The kind of place you forget the world even exists. The house sat at the edge of town, near a tree line thick with pines. It was beautiful, in a haunting way. Large porch, shuttered windows, wind chimes made of antique spoons tinkling in the cold breeze. The lawyer greeted me on the steps. Short man, blunt. Carried a clipboard and an envelope. "Everything is in order," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You're free to enter. The property's yours." He left no debts. I thanked him. But I didn't step in yet. I just stood there, staring at the door. At the cracked paint near the hinges. At the faded welcome mat. At the key already waiting for me in the lock. Because something told me that once I stepped inside, nothing about my life would look the same again. And I was right. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Old houses always smell like something. Cedar, mildew, dust. But this one was different. It wasn't unpleasant, just faintly familiar. A blend of cologne and coffee grounds, with something sweet underneath, like vanilla or aged paper. The kind of scent you don't realize you've missed until it pulls something buried out of you. A memory that doesn't belong to you but still lives in your bones. The house was spotless, not abandoned, not stale. Every surface dusted, every photo aligned perfectly on the wall. It felt like someone had just stepped out and would be back any minute. But it had been 6 months. The lawyer said Richard Shaw died in that very house, peacefully, in his sleep. No foul play, no next of kin stepping forward. Just a man with a secret will and a list of assets he gave to someone who didn't know him. I moved through the living room slowly. Wood floors creaked under my steps, soft and rhythmic, like the house was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The furniture was classic, heavy, well-loved. A few throw pillows on the couch had embroidery, birds in flight, stitched with precision. A fire poker leaned against the stone hearth, unused. On the mantel sat a single framed photograph. A woman, mid-30s, smiling at the camera, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. Blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, Anna, younger, but unmistakably her. My fingers trembled when I reached for it. There was no label, no frame backing, just the photo. I turned it over, hoping for a date or a message. Nothing. But that was the moment something snapped into place. She'd been here. Not just recently. She'd lived here. Long enough to be photographed. Long enough to leave pieces of herself in the air. I sat on the edge of the couch, the photo in my lap, and let the realization hit. She knew this man. She didn't just know him. She was part of his life. A big enough part that he kept her picture on the mantle like family. Or more. I thought back to the last few months of our marriage. The subtle things. The way she'd started wearing perfume again. How she guarded her phone like it held nuclear codes. How she stopped making eye contact when she laughed. And I saw it for what it was. Not distance. Not boredom. Guilt. There had been nights when I'd wake up and she wasn't beside me. She said she was in the guest room reading or out for a walk to clear her mind. I believed her. I always believed her. That was my mistake. The kitchen held more clues. Recipes tacked to the fridge. A grocery list written in her handwriting. Spices organized alphabetically in a drawer, just like she did at home. And in one of the lower cabinets, a chipped red mug with a barely visible label on the bottom. Mine. It had a faded logo from my old college. I lost it 3 years ago. I thought it got thrown out during a spring cleaning binge. But here it was. My mug, in this man's house. I backed away from the counter like I'd touched fire. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, a deep thudding that blurred the edges of everything around me. The world tilted again, like it had the day the envelope arrived. Had they been together? Behind my back? Was this house theirs? A part of me wanted to leave right then. Just walk out, lock the door, and pretend I never came. But I couldn't. Because the more I saw, the more the house pulled at me, like a mouth slowly opening, ready to speak. I moved down the hallway. 3 doors. Bathroom. Guest room. And at the end, a study. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. It was darker here. Heavy curtains, desk facing the wall, a bookshelf filled with accounting manuals, tax codes, and old journals. A black leather chair still had the indentation of someone's body, like the room was paused mid-thought. I stepped in. There was a single drawer in the desk that wasn't locked. Inside, I found a stack of letters, neatly bound with twine. At first, I thought they were his. But as I pulled one loose and opened it, I saw the familiar loops of her handwriting. These were Anna's, and they weren't addressed to Richard. They were addressed to me. Letters she never gave me. Dated over the course of 2 years. The first began, "You'll never see this, but I need to write it anyway. I need to say the things I can't say to your face without unraveling everything we've built." The words blurred. My hands shook. Another one said, "Sometimes I wonder who I'd be if I'd met you later. After I understood myself better. After I stopped chasing the people who kept breaking me." She wrote about regrets, about guilt, about trying to protect me from something she couldn't explain. And one line stood out, so sharp it felt like it cut through my skin. I didn't choose him because I loved him. I chose him because I thought I owed him. And I stayed because I thought I'd broken you. I sat there for a long time, hours maybe, reading every word, piecing together a marriage that hadn't been whole in years. And then I saw it. The final letter, unfinished, scrawled hastily, torn at the edges. He said he'd change the will, that it would make things right. But something feels off. I think he knew about. It ended there. No signature, no date. The room seemed to narrow around me. My breath caught in my chest. This wasn't just a love triangle. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something else. Something planned. And suddenly I knew. Richard Shaw didn't just leave me a house and money. He left me a trail. And if I followed it, I'd find out the truth about what really happened between the two of them. And why I was dragged into it. There's a certain kind of silence that only exists after betrayal. Not loud, not explosive. It's the kind that seeps in quietly, like fog under a door, and settles in the bones. That's what I felt. Sitting in that study, surrounded by letters meant for me, but never meant for me to read. Letters written by a woman who once shared my bed, now a ghost on the edge of every paragraph. And somewhere in the middle of that silence, something inside me shifted. Not with rage, not even sadness, just this quiet clarity. A thin, cold resolve. I put the letters back where I found them, in the same bundle. Something told me to leave them there, to pretend I hadn't read them. Not yet. If she or anyone else came looking, they'd find everything untouched. I wanted it that way, because now I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I needed leverage. I returned to the hallway, more focused now. I studied the walls, the frames, the furniture. The house had the careful curation of someone who knew exactly what they wanted others to see, and what they didn't. There was one place I hadn't checked. The basement. The door was narrow and painted the same color as the wall. Easy to miss unless you were looking for it. When I opened it, a waft of colder air rose to meet me, tinged with that scent again. Coffee, dust, something floral and artificial. Potpourri, maybe. The stairs creaked as I descended. The light was dim, just a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, by a rusted chain. My shadow stretched and twisted on the concrete floor as I moved toward the far wall, where several plastic storage bins were stacked neatly. Most of them were filled with typical things: holiday decorations, old tools, a busted humidifier. But one bin had a lock on it, a cheap one, like it was meant to stop someone from snooping, not someone determined. I broke it with a wrench I found nearby. Inside was a collection of documents, legal ones, folders labeled with names I didn't recognize, financial records, travel itineraries. One name came up again and again, Archer Beck, and next to his name, Anna's. Not in handwriting, but typed, repeated, connected, on leases, on wire transfers, on joint bank activity. One file had a birth certificate. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't even close to ready for it. Because under father, it didn't list Richard Shaw. And it didn't list me. It listed Archer Beck. The child's name was Mava Shaw, age 6. I stared at it so long I forgot to breathe. A child. A daughter. But whose? And why was Anna's name listed as guardian? There were photos in the same file. A girl with auburn hair and bright eyes, smiling in a field of wildflowers. One picture had her on Richard's shoulders. Another showed Anna holding her hand near a carousel. The timestamps were recent, just under a year ago. This was real. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about a life she'd hidden. I sat on the concrete floor and let the pieces fall where they may. The letters, the divorce, the will, the inheritance. It wasn't just guilt or regret. It was cleanup, a carefully orchestrated exit. Richard was dying. He must have known for a while. Anna needed to protect the girl. Maybe from Archer. Maybe from something else entirely. So she used me, used my stability, my silence, my blind trust. And when it came time to vanish, she made sure it all looked clean. But something had gone wrong. That last letter. He said he'd change the will, that it would make things right. But something feels off. Off how? Was it a threat? A warning? Or was she trying to leave breadcrumbs? Knowing I'd follow, I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. I had no crime to report, just shadows, documents, and a gut full of questions. So I drove back to my hotel, locked the documents in my suitcase, and made a call. To someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My college roommate, Eli, had gone on to become a private investigator in Baltimore. The kind of guy who didn't blink at messy stories. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, it's been a while," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "I need to know everything you can dig up on a man named Archer Beck." There was a pause. Then, "You in trouble?" "Not yet." Didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window watching the lights from the parking lot stretch long across the pavement, thinking about Anna, about the girl, about how many years I spent loving a version of her that never really existed. But I didn't hate her. Strangely, I understood. We all have compartments we lock away. The version of ourselves that wears the right face, that says the right things. But eventually, those compartments get too full. They crack. spill, and someone always ends up bleeding. The next morning, I went back to the house to retrieve the letters, but they were gone. The drawer was empty. No twine, no notes, no trail. Someone had been there. Not a thief. Nothing else was touched. Just the letters. And that meant someone else knew I was digging. Someone didn't want me to find the truth. But they were already too late. Eli called 3 days later. "I found him," he said. "Archer Beck, real estate and biotech consultant. He's been under investigation twice, both times dismissed. But here's the interesting part. He had a sealed court case 4 years ago. Custody battle, quiet one. Judge suppressed the record." You know who the child was? Not yet. But here's where it gets weird. Guess who represented him in both court cases? My stomach turned. Anna? Her name's not on record, but her firm was. She was a junior partner at the time. Of course, it was all in front of me now. The girl, Mava, wasn't just someone Anna helped raise. She was likely hers. And Archer? He wasn't just a threat. He was the father. Or claimed to be. I asked Eli for one more thing. Find the girl. Where she was now. Who had her? It took another week. During that time, I returned to the house. Every day. Looking for traces. For ghosts. I found bills in Richard's name that were still being paid by autopay from a private trust. A trust with Archer's name as administrator. So Archer had control of the money, the property, the trust fund Richard supposedly left me, except he hadn't. Richard had changed the will, left everything to me. And that meant only one thing. Archer never expected me to find the house. He never expected me to matter. Until now. Eli's next call was brief. She's with a woman named Denise Carver, foster guardian, small town in Vermont. I pulled some threads. Anna's name is on the emergency contact form, but only as a historical record. She hasn't seen the girl in 6 months. Does Mava know? She's 6. She knows someone. Named Anna was in her life. That's about it. I got in my car that night. I didn't pack much, just the essentials, and a copy of the documents I'd scanned from the basement, including the birth certificate, including the financial records. The truth, in a manila envelope. Vermont was colder than I expected. The air thin, pine-scented. The town was small. 2 diners, 1 gas station. Denise lived in a modest cabin just past the tree line. I didn't go to the door. Not at first. I just watched from the distance. Then I saw her, Mava, running through the grass, wearing a red knit hat, laughing. Her laugh was sharp and unfiltered, the way only children can laugh before the world teaches them otherwise. She looked happy, untouched, by the mess her guardians had left behind. And then I saw Anna. She pulled up in an old silver sedan, walked to the door. Denise greeted her cautiously. They talked. It didn't look angry. Just tired. Heavy. Anna walked out with Mava minutes later. They sat on the steps, shared a sandwich, talked like strangers still pretending to be family, and I felt something tear inside me. I should have felt hatred or betrayal, but all I felt was grief. Grief for the life I thought I had. For the child I never knew existed. For the woman who had shattered everything just to protect one small, fragile life. I didn't approach her. Not yet. Instead, I mailed the envelope. I left it in Denise's mailbox that night. No return address. Just a note. She deserves to know the truth. So do you. If Archer shows up again, use this. Then I drove back. It should have ended there, but it didn't. 3 days later, Anna showed up at my apartment in Chicago. She looked thinner, her eyes ringed with dark shadows. She held the envelope in her hands like it was something alive. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said, voice trembling. But I did. Richard promised he'd keep it clean, that he'd protect her. But Archer, he found out. He started making threats. To me. To Richard. That's why the will changed. That's why the divorce happened. She broke then. Collapsed into the chair across from me. He made me choose. between you and her. And I couldn't tell you, because if I did, he said he'd take her and disappear. And now he's vanished. And she's safe. Because you made her safe. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her. And in that silence, we mourned everything that was never real between us. And everything that was, for a little while. You loved him? I asked finally. No, but I feared him. And sometimes, that feels the same. I nodded slowly. She stood to leave, but hesitated at the door. Thank you, she whispered, for not becoming like him. I didn't respond. I couldn't. She left, and I never saw her again. But a month later, I got a card. No return address, just a photo. Maeva, standing in front of a school sign, holding a crayon-drawn picture. It was of a house, a woman, and a man. The man had my hair. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something. Something I didn't know I needed. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. It truly helps the channel. Click the video on screen and I'll see you there.